have quite a number of people still waiting to speak to us. I didn't ever have to use a gavel as a judge. All right, everybody, let's be seated and let's get started again, please. All right, we start with Mr.
Mazer.
Mazer.
Yeah.
Thank you, followed by Ms. Kessler, Ms. Ross, Ms. Barefoot, and Ms. Molina. Here we go.
Hi, everyone. Rafe Mazer with the Walltown Community Association, and I'm here representing the Community Association, which, as I think many of you know, does not support SCAD. And one of the main reasons we don't support this is we, as an organization and individually, have engaged extensively for more than a year. And you can have public participation and public input, but if you don't take any of the public input, what is that but window dressing? And I want you all to think about the consequences of this. And I want to speak to a provision I've mentioned before, which is the removal of many of the buffers. In particular, removing reasonable buffers between small residential and large-scale residential. And what you're going to see with this, because they're going to focus on where land is less expensive, a lot of the city's precious resource of lower-income homeowners, and we know those are really a rare thing, are going to be the neighborhoods where they will target. And I live in a community with a significant amount of older homeowners on fixed incomes in old homes. And I have seen the impact of infill next to my house even, and how it impacts the foundations. And so if you don't let these reasonable buffers exist and you let someone do a 4 or 5 story apartment building 5, 6, 7 feet from the property line, the excavation they have to do will disrupt the soil and you're going to cause damage. Today, I was with a neighbor trying to figure out with her what to do about the shifting of her foundation with her little pension and her little Social Security, and vetting contractors with her. These are people, you know, you can call them blight, I call them neighbors. And it just angers me that we are running this through and they wouldn't listen to any of the reasonable suggestions. I want ADUs, I want denser, but I would like some minimal protection for some of our most vulnerable lower income homeowners in this community. And so that's why we oppose this. They did not listen, and honestly, some of them do not care. Thank you.
Ms. Kessler, followed by Ms. Ross, Ms. Barefoot, Ms. Molina.
Good evening. I'm back. It may be that, I'm Mimi Kessler, I live in Durham, and my address is on record. It may be that the goals of this issue are the same among proponents and opponents. We just disagree on how to get there. I also think we don't know exactly what you're going to be voting on. There are, I counted 20 issues that come up in the SCAD document. The first item was discussed at the task force meeting for 1 hour, and there was no resolution. I would like to see the task force continue, and maybe that'll be a suggestion. These are not small changes. In some cases, they are extreme. One affordable housing idea in SCAD is to build residential units in industrial zones. I cannot imagine anyone who associates themselves with the word progressive would once again put people of low income, historically more people of color, in an area where their health and safety could be threatened and reinvigorate environmental racism. The PATH provision has rules for sale units and for rental units. The for sale unit would only be required to be affordable for the very first sale. That does not help keep affordable housing stock available. Removing all parking requirements is unrealistic and extreme. People have to drive to most destinations in Durham today because this is not New York City or San Francisco with reliable, expansive public transportation. You can build a building and say that you want to have retail, but if you don't have some parking, that retail venture will fail. I owned a restaurant in Atlanta. It was entirely takeout. It was in a small shopping center, and there wasn't enough parking. Sorry, I've revised my thing quite a lot. Please vote to turn this over to the planning policy experts in the planning department. We can all work with them to propose text amendments that should be implemented before the whole UDO rewrite. If you plan on amending what is written, I think that it is important that we isolate those things that you're amending and republish them so that we can all agree. And the other thing, last thing, during the recent campaign season, Council members Williams and Caballero stated in multiple forums that they would not pass SCAD in its present form. Well, not a single word has been changed as far as many of us know. The vote, I hope the people who voted for you voted well.
Hello, Katie Ross. I live in Bahama. I was also a member of the task force, and I thank the previous speaker who pointed out that the statement was clearly made that the path provisions would be removed, and that was what we were told, and apparently afterwards something happened, doesn't engender trust. So I'm going to read this because just to get the points made. SCAD is being marketed as a remedy for Durham's housing crisis. However, there is no crisis that SCAD fixes. Home units in Durham have been and continue to be built at a rate far exceeding real need. In 2020, the planning department, with expert input, predicted that Durham needs 60,000 new units by 2050. So 30 years after that prediction. An average of 20,000 new units should be built each decade to meet that goal. Since 2020, only 3 years, 20,000 new units have already been built, are being built, or have been approved by the planning department. The need for this entire decade has been met. Of course, the building has continued at the very same high rate as it was. Any supply-side economic theory bringing down prices by increasing supply is already being tested in the real world, and there is no urgency to facilitate even faster development. Furthermore, there is now a glut of rental units in Durham. The attached report from Lee & Associates, and I sent that to each of you, it's in real estate services, shows that the current rental vacancy rate in Durham is 9.2%. That is 3 times greater than Dustin Ingleton of the Triangle Apartment Association testified at the deep dive in affordable housing is advisable. 3% is what's ideal, the ideal balance. And according to Lee & Associates, 5,190 new apartment units are now under construction. So again, if more rental units will make housing affordable in Durham, as some of you have said you believe, hey, the problem solved, there's no need for SCAD. The facts, instead of passing SCAD now, I would suggest that we sit down and with part of the UDO, try to have developers pay for correction of the damage that's already been done to homeowners from blasting and to the damage to our waterways and to everything that preserve rural Durham has shown you through pictures and tours that you've personally witnessed. Holding appropriate profiteers responsible for blasting and other collateral damage of aggressive development may be accomplished by centralizing enforcement of permit requirements to the planning department. Homeowners should not have to deal with several different agencies and hire attorneys and experts to remedy the damage done by rampant development. Thank you.
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you for your service these last 2 years. I have very little to add. I think the eloquence of the opponents tonight has been breathtaking. I want to double down on what Mr. Chavis said, and I really do think that there was a lot of progress made in those discussions at the task force meeting, and I think a negotiated resolution to create ordinances that we can live with and accomplish our mutual goals, because there were certainly things I heard from the proponents that are very interesting and provocative. I want to suggest that those conversations continue with expertise in the room, and I understand that Kay Jowers from Duke University and Dr. Spurlock from UNC were present, and I feel like that kind of assistance is necessary for the conversation to be fruitful. I'm not really sure that I can believe that the proponents of SCAD esteem Durham. I can remember when I first moved here 40 years ago that people in Raleigh were afraid to come to Durham. That was a fact. I mean, it was a well-said fact. I think Durham is merely a tool for the exorbitant increase of their private equity, and that they've got lots of folks behind them from Boca Raton and Atlanta and New Jersey and other places. And I think we can do better for Durham. I think there's a more beautiful Durham yet to be developed. I think it includes all kinds of these options, and I really think that tonight is not the night to pass SCAD. Let's keep talking about it, and I look forward to that conversation. Thank you so much.
I am Mary Molina, opponent, live in Durham, and I have just a few points to remind us about how we got here. How a privately initiated text amendment put forth by a rich white developer from Wake County is being handled by a majority black council, many of whom purport to be progressives. What does the public need to know about this applicant, Jim Anthony, and his colleagues? The information we have is sparse, but there are things that have come to light that bear repeating and bear scrutiny, and should serve as a warning about what the lengthy text amendment could mean for Durham and for so many of our residents for whom there will be no benefits. We know that the applicant had included Habitat for Humanity as a co-applicant and has subsequently removed them from the application as of May 22, but we don't know why, how that came about. We know that neither the planning director nor anyone within the planning department ever verified Habitat's co-sponsorship as is required by our UDO. Further, we know that the pre-application conference never took place, as is also required by our UDO. We know that Mr. Anthony has refused to identify the local practitioners he hired to write the text proposal, outside of naming Mr. Ovelson, for whom he has admitted paying $30,000. We know that Mr. Anthony has stated in public meetings that gentrification is necessary to weed out crime and to push out the undesirable. The undesirable. And we know that in February, another of Mr. Anthony's colleagues, Aaron Lubeck, wrote, "I know the votes are on council. It's just a matter of us getting it there." And so now it's there. Will the developers and the real estate investors be surprised by tonight's outcome? Will their investment of money and time spent lobbying pay off? Will we see what we have come to expect from council with one more 4-3 vote?
Good evening. I'm Lucia Constantine. I'm a resident of 1114 Gurley Street, which is less than a mile from here. My street has seen significant changes in the past 5 years. Thanks to the 2019 Expanding Housing Choices, the precursor to SCAD, 2 700-square-foot homes recently sold for nearly $500,000 and have operated as Airbnbs since they were built 2 years ago. A duplex that had a Section 8 tenants was torn down by a SCAD proponent, Thomas Hennessy, and converted into 6 market-rate units that rent for $2,500 per month. And because of the current affordable housing density bonus, a developer intends to displace the remaining low-income tenants living in naturally occurring affordable rentals to build townhomes for sale. This is the kind of affordability and displacement that is widely produced under our existing zoning regulations and will only get worse if SCAD is approved. SCAD represents further deregulation of an already lax zoning code that serves mostly to line developers' pockets and boost land values at the expense of working-class residents and underinvested neighborhoods. It does nothing to improve the provision of affordable housing for those that need it the most. Instead, it undercuts the city's own public process for changing the UDO, the credibility of its own planning department, as well as federal and local requirements around affordability, which for light-tech developments is 30 years. And it sets a dangerous precedent for governance by allowing an industry to write its own rules. In the same way we don't allow oil companies to write environmental regulations or banks to write financial regulations, we should not let developers write development regulations. I would hope that you all, as elected officials representing the public and the public good, would know that and would vote against SCAD. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Carlina Diananen. I live at 1101 Carroll Street. I am the chair of the board for Durham Habitat. Over these weeks, over these months, you've heard a lot from Habitat. Before I go into that, I do want to say this, though, to council. Your job's not easy. It's not easy sitting here and listening to all these things. You have to balance the weight of your job with the city and then what the citizens want. So I just want to recognize that as I speak and thank you all. Most particular, Mayor O'Neill, and you know where you are in my heart. You're my mentor. I'm also a criminal defense attorney by day. So back to SCAD. We oppose SCAD procedurally and substantively. Why procedurally? Because our name was never put on this with our authorization. I am here to look all of you in the eyes. If you'll look at me in the eyes, we did not give permission for our name to be on that application. We did not. We did not. We were fooled into this. And it's important that you understand this. Our heart is broken because we trusted these people. We trusted them that they were doing the right things. When this came to our board, we were told we would have a seat at the table, that you honorable people wanted us to be at the table as it related to zoning. So we said, absolutely. City Council wants us there, we will be there. Then we asked, what are some things that would be helpful to Habitat? We inquired. 4 things came up. We said, as a board, we need more information because if they're not good for the city, they're not good for Habitat. We didn't get that information. Lots of things went on. Things were never followed up on, and some of that might be our fault. But there's a saying, when you know better, you do better. And so in March, we did better. We investigated, and we took our name off of this. Particularly because, and we sent the letter to each and every one of you, we did not want to put our name out there and to mislead any of you. We have a great reputation in this community for affordable housing. Now, our affordable housing goes along with, we also hold all our mortgages, so there's no interest on our mortgage. What we do is very different than what the PATH program is. And let's get to the PATH program. You all heard in January of 2023, someone from the proponents saying that the applicant wants 5-year affordability. That person did not have the authority to speak on behalf of us. We never wrote the PATH program, and we are absolutely against the PATH program.
Thank
I know I only have 3 minutes to speak. I want to thank you again. And please, we are against SCAD. Vote no. Thank you.
Hello, Michelle Laws, Durham County resident. I too want to take the liberty to thank you, Mayor O'Neill, for an outstanding job representing Durham, specifically representing the people who don't come down here, who are hidden and who are among the least of those. You were our Esther. You are our Esther. I want to say to you, Deidreana, Councilwoman Freeman, I see you as our Vashti. Vashti didn't get to stay in the palace because she refused to dance and perform before the king and his crowd that was assembled at the party that night. Thank you for standing on your moral conviction and understanding the moral compass that you have is to do justice, to love mercy, and to always advocate for the least of those uncompromisably. Well done. Yes, you have a hard job, but you campaigned for it, you asked for it, and we're expecting you to do the job that you were elected to do and to do it well without fear or favor. I have been somewhat triggered by some of the tropes that I've heard and seen. The good bamboozler's brew consists of using words like the poor, affordable housing, sprinkling in a few black folk, and talking about how what you stand to lose doing what's right. That's the bamboozler's brew. Don't do as James Weldon Johnson says to us in Lift Every Voice. Don't become drunk with the wine of the world and forget that your commitment should be to the least of those, to lift those up, and to not be bamboozled and hoodwinked. And if you believe that increasing more units will increase affordability, all you need to do is step out these doors and go 5 miles to the east, to the west, to the north, or to the south, and ask, has that happened under the current development plan? Let's not be hoodwinked. And you're right, those who've acknowledged that development in real estate is not their professional expertise. It's not mine either. Healthcare, and particularly mental health and substance use, are. But I will read from Peter Moskowitz's book, and I encourage you to read it, How to Kill a City, Gentrification, Inequality, and the Fight for the Neighborhood. Mr. Moskowitz says that gentrification happens under developers and real estate realtors who understand the importance of moving capital to increase profit, period. The real estate industry is always looking for new markets in which it can revitalize its profit rate.
Thank you, Reverend Laws.
Gentrification does not mean that the suburbs are over or that cities are becoming more diverse. All it means is that our geography of inequality is being redrawn. Vote
Thank you.
no.
Thank you. All right, we'll hear now, and these are the last 3 cards I have before we will turn to speakers on the internet. Ms. Angel Dozier, Attorney Sherry Rosenthal, and Ms. Dot Doyle. Those will be our last 3 speakers who are here in chambers with us.
I have to say, Madam, as always, Mayor Elaine O'Neill, and join everyone else in just saying thank you for your service. We know, with a period on it. And the way we know with a period on it, and the way that you step into the place with style and grace. Thank you. My name is Angel Isette Dozier. I'm the founder of Be Connected Durham. I've been in Durham for 24 years. I live in the South Side neighborhood, a block away from the historic Hayti neighborhood. I'm here to state the obvious with regard to equitable community engagement and this issue surrounding SCAD. Yes, simplifying codes for affordable development and a collaborative, equitable community engagement process is essential. But it requires genuine commitment and understanding. This isn't an issue of simplifying the codes for affordable development, though it's being called that. Without meaningful follow-through and input from those directly affected, the risk of perpetuating harm to marginalized groups is significant. Surface-level comprehension of equity, detached from the lived experiences of those who have been impacted by harmful development projects, especially Black and brown people who historically do not have access to generational wealth, not because they have done something wrong, but because moving in a society as a marginalized person means that there's a whole set of experiences that go unacknowledged and without frame of reference. If the task force, which no longer exists according to my understanding, is not empowered to authentically influence or speak on behalf of our communities and instead relegated to serving as a token task force, it can lead to decisions that inadequately address our neighbors' needs, those who have always been afterthoughts, further perpetuating disparities and excluding vital perspectives. For example, how do my neighbors know what SCAD is? If we're trying to survive the conditions spurred on by inequitable housing regulations and living conditions for generations? What effort has been put into people who do not have the privilege of graduate school as they wonder about owning or being able to afford a home, as the gentleman spoke about earlier? Even the examples of engagement practices that were led in 2003 and 2007 that we heard about, there were several neighbors throughout the Bragtown community who never heard about those engagement efforts. I would imagine that if those who are historically left behind are part of a process to determine how to simplify these codes for real, and also use their experiences, that we would be able to impact a much higher and much better change in Durham. Thank you.
Ms. Rosenthal and Ms. Doyle. Not trying to be rude, but I told you I was gonna hold you to 3 minutes. So I'm gonna start interrupting when the clock go off.
Hi, Sherry Zann Rosenthal, Wilson Street here in beautiful Durham, North Carolina. I want to start by echoing what everybody said. I want to thank all of you for serving. It's a punishing job. It's a difficult job. Tempers sometimes get high, but my appreciation is very authentic for each of you. I have supplemental comments that I've submitted to the clerk, and you may want to take a look at those. I want to say that it's so frustrating that no logical examination of SCAD has any persuasive effect in shaking what would appear to be the determination to pass this thing. And I want to say that when there are some proponents of SCAD who talk about a walkable, bikeable city with neighborhoods that are served by safe public transit, an extensive public transit system, and small local businesses, and a simplification of our code. I support all of those things, but having looked at and read the SCAD and considered it with colleagues who, like myself, have legal training, many of you know that I'm the former deputy city attorney, I will say that SCAD is so problematic in its substance. But I'm going to talk a little bit more tonight about the process and the due process problems, because other people have spoken about some of the substance. I can't help but mention one thing. The provision that is supposed to be for small business says that it exempts from any kind of approvals and from many of the normal buffers and other side setbacks, anything for commercial that's up to 20,000 square feet. That sounds like a limitation. It's one of a number of things in SCAD that look like a limitation when you read it, but one of the things it does is say that you don't have any zoning approval, no development plan, no site plan. So on a plat, a survey plat, you could have a line, and there's no, you can butt that right up against the building next to it. And so a developer could have a literally infinite strip mall that would meet this provision. And 20,000 square feet itself is not small business, because the average coffee shop or bakery is between 3,000 and 5,000 square feet. Most of them are about 3,500 square feet if you look at industry standards. And so when we were this summer meeting with Jim Anthony and his team as the Inc. team, God, I'm almost out of time already without having said most things, but I offered to write a genuine small business intermixed residential commercial ordinance that would be straightforward, and I offered it twice, and there was no interest or response from the proponents at all. And I think that this shows that this is not a straightforward or authentic concern of theirs. Thank you so much.
Thank you. George?
Good evening. I'm Dot Doyle, and I live at 2311 Woodrow Street. I'm here tonight to urge you to vote no to SCAD. In case you think I'm someone who always is in opposition to development in Durham, I'll remind you that I appeared here just last month in support of the rezoning of the Coke Building property on Hillsborough Road. And several years ago, I supported the rezoning of land along Hillendale Road that was brought to you by Mr. Anthony. In both those cases, there was real dialogue between the neighbors and the developer. There was a lot of back and forth. We wrote some sentences, they wrote some sentences. We eventually decided on some sentences that we could at least all agree on, well, live with. Sadly, despite the time that it has taken for this document to reach you tonight, I do not believe that there has been real engagement in which Durham citizens participated early in the process and had the opportunity to suggest to the applicant and to the city staff changes, as well as items that they might want to include. As an example, earlier this year, I attended 2 citizen engagement sessions with Mr. Anthony and a number of his colleagues at, I think it's called Vintage Church. It's a property that used to be a school. It's across from the Walltown Rec Center on Club Boulevard. At least 3/4 the time was spent with the developers reading through a PowerPoint of the amendment, and only a small amount of time engaging with attendees' questions and suggestions. I don't believe this is real engagement. Furthermore, the process is flawed because this amendment is large and unwieldy, is a large and unwieldy document that cherry picks lines in the code, which is also a large and unwieldy document, making it difficult to consider the changes in the context of the entire UDO. The city has begun the process to rewrite the UDO. Any worthy ideas in the amendment should wait and be incorporated in the new UDO. In the letter I sent to all members of the council yesterday, I addressed a number of specific changes that contribute to my objections to your passing this amendment. I hope you had time to review those. I included concerns about the path component, and although I appreciate the fact that there's an increased commitment of time from 5 years to 15 years, I don't believe that's sufficient. A period of time less than 30 years means we will never catch up to the needs of Durham. I also outlined specific concerns about the infill standards, especially as they relate to height, setbacks, street yards. These are just 2 of the ideas I outlined. Because of my many concerns about both the content and the process surrounding SCAD, I ask that you vote no tonight. Thank you.
We will now turn to our speakers who have joined us online, and I will give you the lineup. We will hear first from Ms. Annie Duran, Damian Gould, Tom Campbell, Donna Standback, Livonia Allison, Peter Crispell, Ken Pugh, and Aaron Colai. If you have signed up and I did not call your name to speak, if you would raise your hand as we hear from Ms. Annie Duran. Ms. Duran?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. So I, first of all, want to thank everyone who came out tonight. There have been some absolutely eloquent, very well-informed speakers. I will not claim to be able to speak as eloquently as them. As many people have pointed out, this document is enormous and difficult to get through, which I believe has prevented a lot of people from participating in this process, which I find very problematic. However, in spite of the fact that by the way, I live in Old North Durham, 910 Orient Street. And in spite of the fact that I am working and currently in school, I felt it was important to be here tonight to speak out in opposition of this document. According to the Triangle Apartment Association, who did a presentation for this very council, many of the apartment buildings in Durham right now are operating with an 8% vacancy rating, and is anticipated to go up to a 10% vacancy rating, which is quite high, meaning that there is a lot of vacant housing, more housing built than we really even need. The problem is it's not affordable or accessible. And I have not seen, in what I have been able to glean from this document, any kind of guarantee that any of the housing that will be built will be affordable to the people who currently live here. It seems that a lot of the housing that's currently being built is for people who may move here or are currently moving here, and not the people who actually live here. There have been a number of other promises or assumptions made that I feel we don't have any guarantee of, that this might be good environmentally. Well, a lot of exceptions have been made for developers, particularly those building on Lick Creek. So I don't have any particular assurance and don't see any assurance in this document that that will be protected. So I feel it is too soon for us to vote on this document, especially with a new city council coming in. I would propose that we wait and work on this. I know that there need to be changes made to how we develop in Durham. I don't think that this is it. I also want to point out, as many people have pointed out, that the majority of the proponents of this document are developers or in real estate in some way. I recall reading a quote, I believe it was a quote from Councilmember Caballero, that we should be taking the advice of real estate developers because comparing them to teachers or doctors, why wouldn't we take the opinion of a teacher?
Mr. Wren, if you would finish up your statement, the clock has gone off, and I realize you may not be able to hear it, but if you would just finish your sentence, ma'am.
I was just going to close out by saying that teachers and doctors do not make more money if their curriculum or the medicine works better. These real estate developers stand to make quite a bit of money if we pass this document. And I think that we should just keep that in mind. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Gu, Damian Gu.
Madam Mayor, Damian Gu is here in person.
Hi, my name is Damian Gu.
You're here in person.
Yes, I'm here in is something I need to do. Yeah, I'm here in person. I registered on Zoom, and I did not realize I was actually able to speak because I am not actually a resident of Durham. I am a resident of Raleigh. Some of you on the council and the community may have met me over the past months when I was volunteering for to elect now council member-elect Nate Baker. Let's see. Sorry, I was really not expecting to be able to speak. So my script is way off. Yeah, I drove 42 minutes from Raleigh to speak here. Well, I didn't know I was able to speak, but because I wanted to give a voice to someone from Raleigh who was not motivated by profits and motivated by people, because some of you might wonder why is there someone from Raleigh speaking here? Well, someone from Raleigh applied for SCAD. I'm talking about Jim Anthony. He's from Raleigh. Yeah, I was going to mention the Habitat for Humanity, which was already mentioned that they pulled their support because their name was added without their permission. Yeah, you can tell I was really not prepared for this. Sorry. Yeah, my recommendation would be to either, I don't know if it's possible, but make a motion to table it indefinitely, or please vote no. Thank you guys all for all you do. I'm really glad I'm not an elected official, so I don't have to deal with that. But I really appreciate you guys for doing that. And thank you for your time. SCAD is bad.
Mr. Tom Campbell? Mr. Campbell? Mr. Tom Campbell, if you can hear me, sir?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, you would have 3 minutes. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Hello, my name is Tom Campbell. I'm a resident of Sprunt Avenue here in Durham. And I've been a resident of Durham since 1970. I'd like to thank you all for your service on the council, and I have some understanding of what that is like, as I was a member of the Durham City Council way back from 1981 to 1989. Most of the things I was going to talk about have been covered very well by previous speakers, so I'll try not to go over things too often. But one thing, I think that making the development process less expensive for the developers will not necessarily lead to less expensive development. And that it's indeed quite likely that it will just lead to more profits for the developers. And that has been spoken to as well already. I think that taking the 17 articles in this amendment and looking at them as you go through the process of the new UDO in the coming year would be looking at those issues in the context of the UDO would be the way to go forward. And there are some good ideas in this, and some that are quite suspect in my mind. The precedent, though, the thing that bothers me the most about this is the precedent of passing a complex ordinance like this that has originated from the group that the ordinance will regulate. Now that just doesn't smell right. That doesn't seem like the way government should work, government of the people, by the people, for the people. And it's especially bad if that situation is made worse when that ordinance is passed by a lame duck city council. That just seems like it seems like something Donald Trump would do. And that's not what we expect of the Durham City Council. Thank you.
Ms. Donna Standback? Ms.
Can you hear
Standback?
me now?
Yes, we can. You have 3 minutes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor O'Neill and council members. I'm Donna Steinbach. My address is on file. I'm a lifelong resident of 70 years in Durham and worked in Durham for all but 6 years. I am against this version of SCAD. I attended the SCAD neighborhood meetings for this amendment in 2022 at Club Boulevard. I couldn't understand then what they were trying to get at, because it seemed that it was all over the place, and it was for small, but any developer could use it, but it was for affordability. But when I looked into the affordability terms, they're still quite pricey. Decreasing urban sprawl appeals to me from a environmental view, but this amendment does not limit the usage as urban or in city, but most of the provisions could be applied by developers in the protected and critical watershed, or even the outside the urban growth boundary. The changes such as smaller borders, smaller yards, and increased impervious soil would be damaging to the watershed areas and are more applicable to urban areas. Will there be less notice to the citizens and citizen participation? From what I read, that is the case. That is not good for Durham. I've attended many neighborhood meetings and little information was made available. I asked many questions and they said, it's too early, it's too early. And the replies and actions were not handled well. SCAD will make it easier for all developers, and it will not be limited to just the small scale the way it is written now. So I oppose SCAD. Thank you for your time, and especially thank you, Mayor O'Neill and Dr. Halsey Hyman, for your work this year.
Thank you, Dr. Livonia Allison.
Madam Mayor, Livonia is no longer in the queue unless she is one of the phone numbers here.
All right, 919-682-5219. You see that number? Okay. All right. All right. Peter Crispell, or Crispell, Crispell.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You have 3 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Hello, Miss Mayor, City Council. My name is Pete Crispell. I live in Hayti. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm a builder in Durham. As someone who has built many small housing units, a Durham native, and someone involved with trying to build a tiny house village on church property for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, I stand to gain from the proposed SCAD amendment and am personally invested in the outcome of this vote. I'm sure everyone's mind is already made up for how they will vote for this agenda item, but I appreciate the chance to stand before you and share some thoughts. I'd like to first applaud and congratulate the team of practitioners and community members who have come together to propose the SCAD amendment to the Durham UDO. I know they worked hard and put a lot of effort into compile this proposal and recommendations of best practices. I'd also like to applaud the City Planning Department for the work they put into the multi-year development of Durham's comprehensive planning process. I think the community engagement on this project has been a huge step forward for a city which prides itself on government of, by, and for the people of Durham. With a comprehensive plan in place for the city moving forward and a rewrite of the Unified Development Ordinance scheduled for this coming year, passage of this amendment seems like it would undermine the capacity of the city of Durham to govern itself. With the preemption policies of the state legislature already limiting the capacity of North Carolina municipalities to govern themselves, passage of such a powerful text amendment to local development ordinances in the face of a comprehensive planning process feels like a self-imposed undermining of our elected officials' capacity to govern our fair city. I ask the council to allow our city government and planning department to proceed with the UDO rewrite armed with the research and best practices that have come out of this amendment proposal process, but not encumbered and bound by it. I ask you to vote no on this amendment. Thank you for your consideration.
Mr. Ken Pugh.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You have 3 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Mayor and councilors, I'm Ken Pugh, a lifelong resident at 3503 West Cornwallis. A decision to adopt SCAD appears to be made with undue haste. First, the SCAD task force should complete their work. Second, I have great respect for the planning staff. I've worked with them in the past. In the analysis of SCAD, wherever the staff comment reads, staff recommends evaluating the effectiveness and impacts of this change as part of the UDO rewrite. I heard what the staff said, but what they're really saying is it requires more study. Don't implement a regulation until you've studied its effects and consequences. As the proponents have said, I am strongly in favor of good urban design, promoting infill, helping small and local developers, and creating affordable housing. I'm strongly in favor of cohesive, non-conflicting, simple, and consistent regulations. However, if the purpose of SCAD is to promote infill within the city, it should only apply within the urban growth boundary. You just passed the new comprehensive plan that has that as a goal. However, almost every provision in SCAD applies to everywhere in the county. Let's be consistent. If the purpose of SCAD is to help small local developers, then it should have a provision that it only applies to that group. There should be a geographic limitation, i.e. developers who live in Durham, and a size limitation, i.e. less than 15 units a year should be part of the ordinance. If the purpose of SCAD is to encourage affordable housing, then it should have a provision that it only applies to housing selling under a certain limit. For example, 70% of Durham average price or 70% of Durham average rental. If the proponents are really sincere about these goals, then they should have no issues with having these additional provisions. Even with the current regulatory environment, Durham has experienced massive growth, as you've already heard. So SCAD should be directed so it works specifically toward the goals of infill, small and local developers, and affordable housing. Or else what will happen is you will get the mega developers messing up the entire county of Durham. Thank you for your consideration.
Mr. Aaron Kohli, Kohli. Mr. Kohli, can you hear me? Is he still there? Is he unmuted?
He's unmuted, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kohli, you will have an opportunity to speak, sir.
If not, we can move on to Connor Hartman, who has their hand raised.
All right, we'll come back to you, Mr. Kohli. Mr. Connor Hartman. And if you would tell us whether you're speaking as a proponent or in an opponent, sir.
Madam Mayor, I'm speaking as an opponent of the provision. And Madam Mayor and City Council members, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to this issue. And I know that you are the great stewards and representatives of our community and the public good in all that we are trying to accomplish. I have to say the SCAD is one of the most concerning public policy approaches I've seen in our community. And I don't think any reasonable analysis would demonstrate how it advances the community and public interest. I think any balanced review of the facts would lead one to conclude that it negates many of the most important aspects of the comprehensive plan and the extensively debated UGB. Titling, naming of legislation and provisions in misleading ways has been an age-old approach in politics, and one that I find to be deeply troubling. I think it's clear that the SCAD has limited application to affordable housing. And for those of us who really care about that in our community, I think we have an obligation to really scrutinize those provisions and ensure that what this is, this piece of development legislation and consideration is something that really advances what Durham is all about. I engaged actively with my neighbors in the UGB and comprehensive plan process, and I find the SCAD to be especially concerning. We've had many thoughtful comments tonight from so many other residents, and I heard many proponents of the SCAD speak about issues that I think that we can all agree on that are important. However, what they didn't state are all the other provisions in the SCAD that are deeply detrimental to the entire community. And I believe that the planning staff and the city council and the county commissioners and all of the residents of Durham and the wider Durham community really believe that we need to do something that is important, comprehensive, and treats all of Durham's citizens fairly and represents them in the growth of this community. And this SCAD does not do that. And I would propose to this body, to the city council, that you please consider the right provisions within the UDO in the right process.
Thank you,
And
Mr. Hartman. Your 3 minutes is up. Thank you so much. Our last speaker for this evening before we get to our rebuttal, and just to let you all know, it's almost like you have about 70 minutes of rebuttal, so we'll be calling you all up as you so desire to rebut what has been said by the opponents. We will look to Mr. Aaron Colai as our last speaker opponent. Mr. Colai, K-O-H-L-I.
Madam Mayor, he's not in the queue.
Not there? All right, we will now turn back to the proponents for rebuttal. If there are any who have comments at this time, if you will come forward.
Thank you, Mayor. Dan Jewell again. The proponents group asked me if I could say a few closing statements. I think it's less of a rebuttal than it is an acknowledgement of, what makes Durham the great community that it is. The fact that we have this kind of public discourse. You hear it almost every other Monday night, twice during the twice a month at various zoning meetings and things of that. We are a community that speaks up. We are a community that shares our concerns. We are a people that want to know what's going on, and I'm proud to be part of that community. What I will say, though, in all sincerity, is that this has been my life for the last 40 years, and that is that the unknown or the unexpected is what scares people. And people who are worried about things want to speak up and say, I don't know enough. What does this really mean? What is this going to do to me? And we should go ahead and have more public discourse before this moves on. Well, this endeavor started in early 2021. This endeavor started when we first reached out to the planning department and asked them to take on this task of what you have before you tonight. The planning department, I think, wisely decided that this was a really hot potato. They had just recently come off of expanding housing choices, and I think everybody was still a little bit shell-shocked, had war wounds, things of that nature. So the planning department, I think, wisely chose to take some of the original proposal forward, put it together in one of the omnibus text amendments that was approved earlier this year. What I would like to say, though, again, is I truly believe, and all of the proponents in this truly believe, that these are important to move Durham ahead with providing the additional housing that we need, that we desperately need right now, so that we don't become another Chapel Hill. And those of you who are familiar with Chapel Hill know that they continued to clamp down development regulations for years and years and years. And what they have ended up becoming is one of the most expensive communities in North Carolina to live in. We have an opportunity to do a little bit better. And that's why we're here before you this evening to say, let's move this forward. If there are things that don't work, the planning staff has already said, we can address those in the UDO, and we would look forward to doing that. But again, I'm proud to be here. I'm proud to be part of Durham, and you have a tough decision ahead of you, but thank you for all the time that you've put into this. Thank you.
That clock actually was not for you, Mr. Jewell, if you wanted. You had about a whole bunch of time for rebuttal, so I don't want you to be short. So you really didn't have a clock.
That's okay. I kind of brought it to a conclusion because I had the clock running out on me there.
No, it's
but
really shouldn't be one right now.
Yeah, I think that's the main point. You know, Chapel Hill made a huge mistake for many, many years and became the most expensive community in the Triangle, and maybe one of the most expensive communities in the state of North Carolina, just because development regulations and timelines became more and more and more onerous. And I know folks are concerned about rising housing costs, they're concerned about displacement, things of that nature, but I sincerely believe, and I know all the proponent speakers surely believe, that the path forward to help with that is to make it easier to bring these small projects forward, make them a little bit faster, even remove some of the approval timelines. Again, I've been around for a long time. 30 years ago, a site plan approval took 2 or 3 weeks. Now it takes 5 or 6 months. And almost every new development ordinance change that's taken place over the last 10 years, other than expanding housing choices, even though well-intentioned, saving trees, reducing the amount of grading, buffers, things of that nature, each one of those has made things incrementally more lengthy and more expensive to be able to build some housing, particularly on smaller scale projects. And I will close by saying this, and I won't take 59 minutes and 30 seconds. I will close by saying this. I know there's a lot of discussion, and I can appreciate this, that why don't we just defer all this to the new UDO rewrite, which is just kicking off right now. And what I and what our group would say to this is, we need this now, and I have been involved in ordinance rewrites in Durham and other places. We are looking at least 3 years from now before a new UDO is adopted, because the great public discourse that you've been hearing tonight and for the last year and a half on this, multiply that times a factor of 10, and that's what will happen during the public hearings for the UDO. And I say that because I have seen it before. So this is important now. There can be a course correction, as planning has already said. If some of these things that they've said maybe need to be tested a little later don't work out, we have time to adjust those. But we need housing now. We need a modicum amount of regulatory reform right now, and that's what this is. So thank you again for your time, and we look forward to good discussion among the council members. Thank you.
Thank you. And I did want to reiterate that you are speaking for, as in rebuttal for everybody. Is that correct, Mr. Jewell? All right. I will now, at this time, declare our public hearing to be closed, and the matter is back before the council. Before I open it up to our colleagues for further discussions, I do want to make a letter that was received by the city council today, a part of the official record of this discussion. This letter is dated November 3rd, 2023. It is coming from Blue LLP attorneys at law. It is addressed to the city council, TC 2200001, Simplifying Codes for Affordable Development, SCAD. Dear City Council, our firm represents Habitat of Humanity of Durham, Habitat or HFHD, in light of the recent controversies concerning the proposed text amendments for simplifying codes for affordable development. We have been asked by Habitat to assist in an internal investigation of Habitat's internal systems and controls and how it interfaces with the City Council. As made clear in Habitat's recent press releases, HFHD supports sensible changes to the UDO that align and promote our mission and, most importantly, the overall community good. The Board of Directors of HFHD, its CEO and staff do not support SCAD as it is currently written, will not apologize for actions related to SCAD, and will not reverse decisions made in March and April 2023 regarding SCAD. In light of the recent controversies concerning SCAD, Habitat is reviewing its internal systems and controls and how it interfaces with the City Council. This letter is not taking any further positions on SCAD. Instead, Habitat is seeking information from the city about its process and procedures related to the application process and the particular application. We have learned much about this process during the investigative reporting of the Independent Weekly, with limited comment from the city and City Council. Specifically, Habitat is trying to better understand how it became associated with the application without signing the application, being informed of the application upon its submission, and why it cannot remove its name from the application. With that in mind, Habitat asks the following questions. Number one, is there a system or process in place with the planning department to verify the identities of applicants? Number two, who are the other applicants on this application? Number three, who represented Habitat at the pre-submittal meetings? 4, who paid the associated application fees to submit the request? 5, who represented Habitat at the neighborhood meetings? 6, did anyone at the City County Planning Committee JCPCC hearings represent that Habitat was an applicant and or author of SCAD? And if so, who was that person? Number 7, did anyone at the Planning Commission hearings represent that Habitat was an applicant and or author of SCAD? And if so, who was that person? Number 8, why was Habitat not allowed to remove itself from the application? Habitat also requests the following information. Number 1, all documents submitted by the applicants for this application. Number 2, minutes and documents from any pre-submittal meetings held. Item 3, copies of checks or proof of payment for the application fees. Number 4, notices, minutes, presentation materials, and recordings, if any, for and from the neighborhood meetings held concerning the application. Number 5, materials presented at the JCPCC meeting relating to SCAD. Number 6, emails to and from the city and city council regarding Habitat and the SCAD application. Your attention is greatly appreciated, and your responses will help Habitat and its partners build homes, community, and hope. Sincerely, Blue LLP, Dan T. Blue III. And this was copied to our city manager, Wanda Page, Sarah Young, our planning director, Carlina Denonan, Habitat for Humanity of Durham, and Tiana Jonah, Habitat for Humanity of Durham. Just wanted to put that as a part of our official record for these hearings. And now I will turn it over to my colleagues to my right for any questions they may have or any comments at this time. To my left, any questions or comments at this time? Councilwoman Jose Hyman.
So I have a question for the applicant.
I'd like to introduce Mr. Aaron Lubeck. He has a lot more technical knowledge of this than I do, so between us, we'll answer questions. Thank you.
So thank you. My question is not so technical, but it is, I know when the first person was up there, he stated that in terms of housing economics, that the increasing supply of housing, apartments, lower rates and rent. And so I just want to know what evidence or research can you give me to back that?
We have at least 15 sources that we pulled together that show a correlation between an increase in housing supply leads to a decrease in overall housing costs.
Okay. Another question. What other affordable, go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, go.
One of the statements made earlier that I think is important to clarify is that there is, in fact, rising vacancy in downtown Durham. Because so many more units are being produced, that is where most of the construction of new apartments is taking place. And so what is happening is that excess supply is causing those landlords to do things that effectively lower their rent. They're giving away free rent, and they're doing what anyone rational does to try to fill empty units. There's a reason why those units are empty, and that's because they're the most expensive units in the market. What we're trying to do is open the door for small-scale development, duplexes, quads, ADUs with more bedrooms to, in effect, create that small market opportunity that is where people want to live, not in expensive downtown buildings.
Okay. My other question is, what other affordable housing have you been involved in or built?
Over the last 2 years, I've been involved with the development of a community that is going up right now on Carr Road. It's approximately 200 low-income housing tax credit units. I worked on that project for about 5 years before actually bringing it to fruition with Taft Mills development. There's another project that Steve Toller and I have worked on with a group from Kentucky called LDG. It's going to be another approximately 200 units of LIHTC, low-income housing tax credit units. I have another approximately 500 units, which I'm in the process of working on right now, which will all be priced well below downtown Durham apartment rents.
You said downtown Durham?
I am not working in downtown. All my projects are in the suburbs.
Okay. Okay. And I guess one of the things that I've seen over my 18 months, almost 2 years, is that a lot of our developers here in Durham can't really afford to build here, right? And so I'd like to see more of that the developers here in Durham can have that, could be at the table. So I'm just curious to ask, what is your interest in Durham if you don't even live in Durham?
That is a wonderful question. I went to Duke University and graduated in 1976. I've had a soft place in my heart since running on the track at Duke with NC Central athletes who I adored because they had just come back from Mexico City in 1972. I've been connected to this city for a very long time, probably longer than many of the people in this room. Been developing here for 30 years, and I've been honored to be part of this community, and I actually do wake up in the morning thinking about how can I be part of the solution to this housing crisis that is very real. That's what motivates me to be part of this project.
And you might have answered this, but do you also have projects in Raleigh?
Yes, I work in multiple states, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee.
And so my last question is, and again, you gave us some of this, but in your real opinion, do you feel that this SCAD amendment would really help all levels of economic development? I mean, lower, middle class, higher. Do you really feel that in your honest opinion?
I do feel that there is one level that it's not going to help, and those are the large-scale developers who are the ones who dominate the landscape in Durham today because they're the only ones who can afford to get through the development process. We're trying to make it possible for the little guys and gals to make deals happen here, whether it's in their backyard or whether it's in a small assemblage of lots. That is the focus of this text amendment.
Thank you.
Councilman Williams?
Just more so a point of order or process. Are we going to be able to discuss how we're going to move forward on this tonight? And I'm just going to suggest that there is not everything. I think everyone in this room does not prefer us past this as is. And I hope that we can get to the point of being able to discuss those points. I would love to hear, from my colleagues, there's something that you want to pull out to actually discuss, and we look at the rest that's non-controversial, and we just kind of move forward with that. If not, I think we're going to be here till about 4 a.m.
No, we don't want to be here that long, Councilman Williams. I promise you we won't be here that long, but I can kind of speak to that. I wanted to also give you and Councilwoman Freeman the opportunity to kind of catch focal on your views of the task force. And just since I have the mic right now, one of the suggestions that I would hope we would consider is what we started, and that is finishing that process. I have not heard a good reason why we shouldn't move ahead other than we heard during the task force that there were some developments that were already in place or moving if this passes. And I've also heard that there's some sense of urgency on behalf of some of the proponents. I have not seen that urgency in that you're changing the landscape for an entire city. And so in that vein, it is incumbent upon us, I think, to take the time as we've started a process to allow that to its completion. Whatever it is, it's nothing new for us to have a task force. I've chaired them for the city. They normally run about 18 months, and you have some more community input. With something this expansive and this unusual, I don't see what the urgency is in not allowing that process to continue. It was very informative. I think people got something out of it and was beginning to kind of gel on, let's see how we can move it together. I do think it is an opportunity, it's explained to us by our experts, where we can look at this as a national model, where you actually sit down and you figure out how to make it work from Durham. If your emails are like mine, it has been probably 250 to 300 to 400 folks who have written over the last 48 hours saying no. And so when you have that kind of, and this issue, since I've been on the council, has been the most controversial. And people are expecting that this is going to be a 4-3 vote if we vote on it tonight. I've heard that over and over again. You've heard that stated, and I think it behooves us to stop and this council really listen to folk and give them an opportunity to participate in this process. So I'm for a task force and not voting on this. And if I have to vote, I'm going to tell you right off, my vote is no.
Councilman Freeman, I think we can kind of address the task force. I too am interested in continuing a task force. However, there's been over 200 meetings on this document. There have been a lot of engagement. I think there can be more because I think this can evolve into a housing plan. But for me, it's about fidelity to the process as well. And what we're talking about here is, it's not like someone illegally submitted this to the city. Now, I'll be the first to say, and I've said this before, I look forward to proposing a policy to where no one can adjust or modify the UDO at this size at one time. Now, that would be the preference of the council, and that is to come. I think that we've learned our lesson But this has been a legal process. We may not like it, and many may not agree with it, but that is what happened. This is a privately initiated and submitted amendment to the UDO, and we can't treat it as if it's illegal if it's legally on the books. And if we don't acknowledge that, then therefore we expose ourselves on the other side. So for me, this commentary, this statement that I'm making right now is not for or against this policy. It's more so acknowledging that there is a legal process that was followed, and that is very important. I don't know how I'm voting just yet because we haven't been able to discuss it. In regards to the task force, I think that we should have a task force that can actually work with folks in the industry, private residents and citizens, on what a housing plan actually could look like. And I think that would be a great, way to engage. But to say that there hasn't been any engagement, that's just not true. And it's been a lot about personalities, and it's been a lot about characters. It's been a lot about individuals. It's been a lot about the applicant. A lot of it I actually agree with. But when you're in this seat, you have to make an objective decision. You do have to, and part of that objectivity is looking at how it affects the community at large. So I look forward to hearing a bit more discussion from my colleagues. In regards of the task force, something that was omitted, that was stated a lot tonight about the applicant pulling out path, I did make sure that I stated that the task force was there to provide recommendations, not make final decisions. I made that very clear. And therefore, we have the task force to make recommendations. So it would be disingenuous to expect that a final decision came out of the task force that the council is going to actually follow tonight. So one of the recommendations in the task force was to remove the PATH program. That would be amongst us to discuss. And whatever the fate of the council would be, that would be it. But there were some, and I don't have it in front of me, but there were some matters that were discussed that were pulled out in the task force meeting. Councilmember Free, I don't know if you remember what they are. It was like 7 items, eight items, but everything else, I believe, it was not as controversial.
Mayor Pro Tem, but I do, before you start, is to give her a chance to, since she was co-chair of the committee, to offer her comments.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I appreciate Councilmember Williams pointing to the conversations we did have. I will say that engagement is not just meetings, and it's been a struggle to just kind of stay objective in this process, noting that there's a lot of inequities already built in. And so I know that the 200+ meetings for this document means a lot of time, but it's a lot of wasted time if it doesn't yield what we need as a city. And I'm very clear that I do agree that the fidelity of the process has to match our needs. And that we have to come to some type of agreement around what needs to move forward, because it is not, it's not feasible to just say that we don't need some changes to our code so that we can simplify it for developers. I don't think that this is the process. I don't think that this is the text amendments, but I do think that there is a way that we get there, and I'm confident that we will, regardless of what happens tonight, because I know that the people in this city are not going to stand for just being snow rolled or hoodwinked by some man out of Raleigh. I think that we had a very good chance to have the conversations and to get started based on the 8 items that were brought forward in context, whether it was around parking or buffers or a different variety of things. The conversation did not touch on people with disabilities or, just kind of like ADA needs. But I do know and understand that the building code does touch on that. And so I am aware that there needs to be a lot more awareness of what is involved in the code and what is involved already. I am pushing back a lot on the fact or the comments around how we need to remove these regulations as if that's the hindrance. I offered, or I made the request that we actually look at some of the projects because we could pilot some of the amendments in action so that we could actually see it real time. And that offer was not taken up, I will say. And I haven't heard anything regarding that, which leads me to believe that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes, and it doesn't really create a very transparent public process and the way in which I had hoped this would go. I will say that in the conversations we had at JCCPC when Habitat was presented, that was a real big driver, and it says a lot when your housing advocates are against, your affordable housing advocates are against moving forward as well. And that doesn't mean that they wouldn't want changes to the code. It just means that this is not it. And so I'm really trying to understand why the applicant has not withdrawn this as opposed to pushing it forward, noting that we could actually continue with the conversation. Yeah, we're in this position because the applicant put us in this position. And it is not lost on me that there's been a lot of harm created in our community, whether by words or by actions. And the people who are going to wear this are not the people who are applying, and not the people who are going to benefit by profiting off of development. I wholeheartedly trust the process, and whatever we do tonight is what we do, but just know that I will continue to keep pressing on making sure that we figure out what affordable housing looks like for the people who actually need it, because it's not 5 units, one here or there. It's actually thousands, and those units actually need to be permanently affordable, and that's not what we're talking about, and I'm not vested in this at all. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, colleagues, and thank you all members of the community that have come out to speak to us. 2 very quick opening points. I think that the work that the staff has done to identify the text amendments that there already is wide support around. I'm prepared to move on tonight and bracket out those things that are more controversial, namely sizes of auxiliary units and the other things, and that list has been well circulated. So I'm prepared to do that tonight. Secondly, I do want to, just for a point of clarification, I actually sat in Her Honor's place the first meeting of the task force, and it was made explicitly clear that the task force meetings were not designed to proffer or to accept. At that point, it was a discussion. If we're going to modify that mission moving forward, then we can certainly do that. But noting tonight that things that were represented at the task force have not shown up in documents tonight, that is by design, because the task force was firewalled to be a discussion group, not a place where deals were made or things were cut, because that's what's supposed to happen before this body. That's what's supposed to happen before tonight. Colleagues, this is my first time speaking publicly about SCAD, and I've been waiting for this moment for a long time because there's been just a lot of stuff about this text amendment that just, for those of us that read the document, I imagine some of us scratching our heads and saying, where did some of this come from? I've been voting on text amendments for 6 years, almost 7 years, and these are text amendments. And there's been an approach that I've been taking, and a friend in the medical profession actually shared something with me. He said that folk get in trouble when they deviate from standard care, and that sometimes rich and powerful people want to try and get different outcomes through their money or through their influence by trying to get you to experiment with stuff, when really, human physiology, it doesn't matter how much you make, whether you're black or white, there are some things you just treat a certain way, no matter how much money you make. And that's how I've approached this. SCAD has become so exotic when they're really text amendments. And the notion that we are going to somehow give away all of our power, that we can't take it back, is not the case. We can review and we can amend at any time. It wasn't the case with expanded housing choices. We didn't give away all of our power. The state won't let us do that, actually. I do also want to say that the urban growth boundary, and I heard folk allude to that tonight, is part of our comprehensive plan, which does not have the force of law. The urban growth boundary is aspirational. This ordinance has the force of law. And why do I say that? We have to make a choice, Durham. We have to make a choice what our city is going to look like. And I've heard other cities mentioned tonight. If you go to other cities that are larger than ours, you're going to see cities where you have stores with apartments above them. You're going to see places where you have big buildings next to small buildings. That's what we have to decide where we're going. And if we're going to keep faith with an urban growth boundary, that by definition means we're going to get closer and we're going to get higher. And if you get closer and higher, by definition, you cannot have the same buffers. That's what all of the great metropolises around our country look like. I ride the bus, so we need to get more transportation. But we can either stop growing out and grow in, or we can stop growing in and grow out. Now, listen, I have no shame to admit that I don't know how to do both. I don't, which is why you've elected us to make choices and to make these decisions. But if we are going to stay closer and not get out to our friends in the county, then we have to understand that we're going to start looking like and sounding like and feeling like other urban centers around our country. And SCAD is what it looks like. Now, as far as big developers, exploiting the system, when we had help sent out for ARPA, there were employers who lied about the number of employees that they had and used the money to buy Ferraris and take vacations. And there were other folk who used the money to sustain their businesses and take care of their families. There will always be people who will seek to exploit loopholes. If we're waiting for the moment when we can say we can guarantee that this isn't going to happen, when have we ever voted on anything with that type of guarantee? There will be people who will seek to exploit, and there will be people who will do the right thing. My concern, and does anybody really think that big-time developers are having problems now doing what they want in Durham? Most of the time when we vote, 100% of the time when we vote on something, we are voting to block what can go there. And I wish we were as powerful as people think we are. Most of the time when we vote on a development, there's already a zoning there. So something can be built and will be built. So when we say no to one thing, it's yes to something else. There's no such thing as just a static no. Something is going to go there. And oftentimes what we as a council have to reckon with is the thing that's going to go there worse than what we're putting there? And my final point is, I want to welcome all of the folk who have found religion about what's been going on in legacy black neighborhoods for 30 years. For 30 to 40 years. There are 3 to 4 neighborhoods in this city that look exactly the same way they looked in the 50s. 3 to 4 that have not felt the impact of developments and growth. They have listservs. They have powerful people that live in them. They have wealthy people that live in them. And I'm amazed at the number of people that have picked up on talking points from some of these folk and have started to do the bidding of some of these folk. SCAD, and part of the problem is not what SCAD's going to do to black neighborhoods that have already been catching it. Part of the concern is what SCAD is going to allow to happen in neighborhoods that have not changed. Watch that. And long after I'm gone from this seat, you remember this night and you remember these words. And now we have these folk that are bleeding, their hearts are bleeding, about the help we've been catching in neighborhoods that have been gentrified and targeted for 40 years. And now this is a concern. So I would just caution some of my friends to watch where you're getting some of your talking points from and watch what you're parroting and look at the bigger picture of what parts of our city still look the same. And how does that happen? Why is that? Every area, every neighborhood in Durham, including my neighborhood, is being impacted and will be impacted by growth. You know, when I came, and this is my first time speaking on SCAD publicly, I really, really want to listen to the staff because they've done a lot of work. They've done a lot of work. And finally, we weren't a lame duck council when the SCAD came to us. We've become a lame duck council since SCAD has been before us because we've been dealing with it for a long time. And I heard somebody mention a Donald Trump tactic earlier. A Donald Trump tactic is not letting you make Supreme Court appointments or do your job when you've still got time on the clock. When this first came to us, there was plenty of time on the clock for us to do our job. So with that, Madam Mayor, I'll yield back. I recommend going with the staff has recommended, pulling out those controversial parts, going with more task force stuff. But there are some things in here that are going to make it into the UDO rewrite. We already know that some of the things in this document are going to be part of the UDO rewrite. I think we should move on those things. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Any other comments? Okay. Councilwoman Caballero.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to know what the 8 items are, because I know what it is in the staff analysis, but that's only about 4. So I would just like to know what the 8 items are.
What I was going to do is I've talked with Councilwoman Freeman and Councilman Williams, and they have those items, and then we can, they will discuss those, and then we can figure out whether you want to pull those out, leave those in, or just how you all want to proceed in that matter. I did not give them time to talk to each other, so I am going to ask, if you don't mind, Don, can I ask you to change seats with Councilwoman Freeman and put her down here so that they can kind of talk for a second?
Madam Mayor, should we take a break and let them talk?
I'm sorry?
Should we take like a 10-minute break and let them talk?
Time, thank you. I appreciate that.
It's just a suggestion.
5 minutes. I don't want to put them on the spot, but I do want them to direct this conversation since they will be here, you know, after I leave. And so if you all would give us a 5-minute break, that would be so helpful, and then they can talk.
Thank you.
Then you don't have to move, though.